and a settlement. He was a popular guy, and the settlement was created. Now I want to show you, like, in what way it is created. No, I mean, this is not some military guy that defined a point and, you know, this whole kind of rational system of state. It's an intersection of various kind of players. No, independent kind of settler activity, the military giving permission, corporate interests, etc., etc. No, and in fact, what is very often realized is that the logic of electromagnetic communication, in fact, the logic of cellular communication is very compatible with the logic of the civilian occupation, right? All of them need to occupy hilltop and be in either visual or electromagnetic kind of triangulation with other points. So in fact, those antennas are inviting, like seeds, they're coalescing various kind of political forces and energies around them, no? And this is kind of like becoming the seeds of new cities, no? Around those bits of infrastructure. As you know, the mobile home is the absolute essential tool of colonization. It could be dropped either from helicopters or from trucks, and the repetitive organization of them is creating kind of like a seed for what later architects would put, which is the single-family house and garden, a kind of a dream house that invites the sort of suburban communities who would be more or less working in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, but living in those settlements as they kind of solidify now, right? I mean, the solidification comes second. What is interesting is our point of singularity on the landscape. In fact, a point of intensity is kind of starting weaving those energies, and later architecture kind of arrives to formalize it. And in fact, as I will show later, I think in more detail, become a kind of like an optical device on a suburban scale. No, I mean, the form of the settlement kind of responds to the desire to sit on a hilltop and to look in all directions. This is one of the more famous architects of the settlement. So, in fact, here on the top and here on the bottom, on the top you see a Palestinian village, and on the bottom an Israeli settlement. What you see here is a snapshot of conflict. What you see here is, in fact, a war that is conducted through architecture. There's nothing naive in this image. Even the trees that are between the Israeli settlement and the Palestinian village are this kind of pine trees that leave acidic drop on the ground that poison the terrain so that grazing would not, which is a very Palestinian kind of economy, would not be useful. So it's kind of like a poisoning of the terrain on it. And here, a kind of an image from this map where, just for convenience sake, I've reduced the notation, the names of the settlements and the Palestinian cities and villages, so that you can see the kind of the formal complexities that is created through this intersection of various types of political forces. Now, all of them, in fact, it has to be said, operate within the frame of occupation. But there isn't a kind of a single political wheel that drives that. It's a various points of intensity. And in fact, what we've done in that human rights report that I've said is to say, if space is created in that way, if taking a term from Joseph Beuys, no, like to call space political plastic, no, it means that it can act as well as a diagram. No? In fact, by looking at space, by looking at the contours of settlements, of the wall even, of the various jurisdiction areas of Palestinian and Jewish zones within it, we can read backwards the forces that have created it. So by introducing the category of elasticity, I do not mean to say that the wall that is obviously solid, concrete, hard fact on the ground, I'm not wanting to say that it's not an action of the state, but I want to say that the political borders that it marks constantly respond and change to political forces. And if you would follow the construction of the wall from 2002 till now, you would see that it constantly changes its path. There was never a master plan either that designed the settlement or the wall, but in fact it's a kind of a bit of reality that hits those micro-political forces that start shaping it. becoming themselves a certain diagrams that we can read for the political forces behind them, right? How we can reverse that? How we can look at form as a kind of, as the diagram, no? I mean, in fact, for me, that shot that you see here is like a still shot from an animation that was possibly need to be in constant transformation. No? I mean, I should be able to press play on it and you would see those areas growing and contracting. And at every moment we can read the various sort of micro and macro political forces that actually are responsible for these transformations. Okay, so the area in Gaza was a little bit simpler, but now I'm back to 2005 and to another involvement that I had in the ecology of conflict. Now not working for this human rights organization, but in fact as an architectural advisor for the Palestinian Authority. At the time leading to the evacuation of Gaza settlement in 2005. So in fact, we're speaking about March 2005 to August 2005. From the moment it was announced and clear that the settlements in Gaza would be evacuated, till the moment that they were. It was the first time that I've seen architecture, the architectural profession in fact, put under state of emergency. In fact, in the Palestinian Ministry of Planning, all architects in Ramallah were put under that state of emergency. All holidays were cancelled, no weekends, etc. And the kind of frantic attempt to come up with solutions for what Palestinians may do with the settlements, as you saw, rather banal suburban fabric, at the moment that they are evacuated. Although the whole evacuation operation was actually conducted as a unilateral Israeli action, there was all this backstage activity. And I remember being at the Palestinian Ministry of Planning in Ramallah during that time and sitting there, and there was kind of like a wave of delegations that were coming from the European Union, from the World Bank, from the IMF, from the EU, I mean, you name it, all the sort of international, supranational organizations that have a stake in that conflict. Each one had a delegation with an architect, with a color brochure, with suggestions for the settlements. In fact, it was a rather a kind of difficult period, security-wise. So each one of those architects had a bodyguard, but because they were all rather young and and sort of dressed rather elegantly, you could never know who's the bodyguard and who's the architect. We were all sitting around the table. It was quite sort of intense. Sometimes you were actually negotiating with the bodyguard rather than with the architect. So it's kind of just doubled up the entire kind of negotiation in a weird way. So what is this kind of, what was at stake there? Obviously, the very right wing in Israel, in fact, it was the right parties that conducted this evacuation, Sharon, obviously. But the right of his party was actually saying, we need to destroy all these homes. Why do we need to destroy them? There were two reasons. One is we cannot afford the image, right? It was an aesthetic kind of argument of in fact, Arabs living in homes of Jews, no? That kind of reversal, and thus the reversibility of a Zionist project that is otherwise typified by the opposite. Jews living in the homes of Arabs, a kind of Judaification of the area. I think that you know that kind of politics, and you have a lot of equivalent to that here. On the other hand, the Israeli right wanted to destroy the homes, but to leave the infrastructure underneath, so that each simple small single-family home could in fact be extruded into a high-rise into which Palestinian refugees would simply be stacked up and in fact resolve a very, the big ethical, political question of the Israel-Palestine conflict architecturally. Right? I mean, if you create housing solutions for refugees, you diffuse, or so they thought, the biggest threat for the existence of the state of Israel. Those refugees, now about 4 million, that want to come back, the right of return, right, to places, to properties that were taken away from them when they were cleansed out of Israel in 1947 and 1948. For the American architects, there was another thing. I mean, it was the homes were seen as something very positive.